All right, welcome everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed that interesting selection of music there. But thank you everybody for joining. Today we're going to be covering the SOMOS.tech Labs. If you haven't already tried them out, head to SOMOS.tech and we're going to do a walkthrough over it today. But real quick, before we even get started, I'm just going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. I want to show a few different things as we go through this actual demo. The idea is for the community to drop questions in the chat, and we'll be able to answer them as they come on. So of course, going to SOMOS.tech, you'll be able to find this actual page. If you go to SOMOS.tech, you'll find it under Programs and inside of Labs. So if you're ever curious about where to find it, that's exactly how you can find it. Now, if you haven't seen this before, the way we broke this down was getting started into not only AI, but also understanding the foundations, because foundations is extremely important, all the way down to what we'll look at even deploying. And what we're going to be using to deploy, if you haven't heard of it before, it's called make.com. So make.com is a great low-code, no-code solution. So you don't have to be a developer. You could be anybody from introductory level 100 all the way down to level 400 and build off of that. And what we'll do is actually build not only one agent, but multiple agents and do an agent-to-agent flow, including with MCPs. So if you don't know what an MCP is, we're going to explain to you what it is as we go through the lab. Now, real quick, if you haven't started, all you have to do is head over to SOMOS.tech, and then inside of Foundations, we wanted to go ahead and explain a little bit about our thinking here. Now, the first thing that you'll notice is that you have the ability to always chat with us. So we're constantly monitoring to see what the feedback is, including, of course, we all know how AI is moving. It's moving pretty fast. So we're constantly updating not only the courses, but also the resources. And what we mean by resources is inside of the AI toolkit, you'll see the model leadership boards. So this leaderboards, the leaderboards are intended to give you visibility into what is the latest and greatest in AI. Specifically, when we're saying AI, we're seeing the ability for, yeah, you were dancing, Derek. I see your comment over there that you were dancing during the loading screen. I mean, me too. But so uh, the concept behind the leaderboards is to be able to give you an idea of what the latest and greatest LLMs are out there. And really, when we think about LLMs, there's core concepts that we need to understand. A great example is that there is a difference between understanding what an LLM is used for. So a traditional AI automation, so you're just literally invoking an LLM for response, versus building an agent. So when we look at the concepts of agents, this is a great example of how you can get a better understanding of which LLM you could leverage if you're building a project. So you can see here, and if you haven't heard of arena.ai before, I really love the approach that they have here, because what they do is they let you use, if we go to new chat and we were able to use this experience, and you get a vote. So almost think about it as like a blind study on understanding which LLM is the best. And you can see that different LLMs rank different higher depending on what scenario you're using them for. Another great example is if you're using an LLM for text or search or vision, or including documentation or documents, you have the rankings here. So my favorite, the one that I use constantly, is looking at coding, specifically like web development. This is great to understand not only the LLMs that you're aware of, but a great example is like maybe you weren't aware of the other options that you have. And of course, with any LLM, there comes with price, and they do a great job at explaining it over here in the other columns. So it's a great resource that we definitely have out there. Another great resource that I highly recommend, that if you're new to LLMs, depending on what field you're in, you could use LLMs depending on like web development, documentation, including PowerPoints, which I think everybody's using LLMs for PowerPoints, is CyberGym. So if you are in the cybersecurity realm, this is another great resource, another tool in your pocket. And the reason why it's important is to understand how this CyberGym, if you've never heard of it, just think about it as a way how you benchmark your cybersecurity abilities to respond, let's say, to a vulnerability. Won't go too deep into that. Just know that it's inside of the leadership boards. Some other things to be aware of is some great other resources from not only YouTube's all the way down to podcasts like the CyberWire Daily, which is a great resource if you're in the cybersecurity world. And then if you're looking at understanding how to vibe code, we hear a lot about vibe coding, but understanding how you could properly vibe code, this is another great resource, another tool in your toolbox to be able not only to build your own custom website, but also have some great example would be different interactions. So as you start looking at the ability to build it, this vibe glossary does a great job of not only helping you understand what you could do, including like data layouts. Like these are some common data layouts that you can leverage. If we go into the different types of layouts, this gives you an example. So as you start building your own projects, the whole reason we have these resources in there is to start giving you an idea of what the possible. So of course, this is something that you could start building from the ground up. And if you ever need like a resource, another great resource there. Of course, there's more hands-on playgrounds. This hands-on lab was intended to get you going from understanding to be able to go to become a little bit more of a well-versed expert, or let's say curious person out there in the field. Net takeaway, the other things that you could look at is some free structured. We're not going to go into each individual one, but if you look at one of the things that I highly recommend is, I mentioned MCPs. I think like when we talk about MCPs can be a little bit confusing. The easiest way to think about MCPs, just think about it as a USB that's able to call out to different tools. So one single plugin, and then you get access to all the tools. I will highly recommend that if you're looking for getting started with MCPs, mcpservers.org is a great resource, but I will say is highly recommend use the official MCP endpoints only. Several reasons why. We won't go too deep into why, but again, this is intended to be another tool in your toolbox. And as you go through the actual resources, feel free to drop questions in the chat. We're always looking at this. You can see this is a test account. So you can see that they posted it's exciting. So of course we liked it and laughed at it. But as we go through building your foundations, the first course that we have, of course, is what is AI? And we're not going to go deep into what is AI here because this is something that you can leverage offline. But when we start looking at the landscape and the total tokens cost, this was actually feedback by one of our members on the truth about AI is that it does cost money to run. So as you're building your projects, just know, always have into account the total cost. And a great example of what cost is if you've never heard of tokenization, most LLMs, not all LLMs, use tokenization. So generative AI is amazing, except I have a small budget. Now you can see as I was typing, this is actually what, in the simplest way to understand it, is called tokenization. So the reason why it's called tokenization is if we look at how LLMs work, we're not going to go into how they actually work, but just know that for them to understand what generative means versus what AI means, and what does this tone and the context mean, it tokenizes it. And another great tool that I highly recommend if you're getting started with AI is the platform.openai.com. They created this really cool tool called Tokenizer. So in Tokenizer, you can show an example and you get an understanding of how it's actually breaking down words, because it's not magic, it's math, it's actually what's happening behind the scenes. But you can start understanding not only text, but token IDs based on the words that you put in. And you'll see that different models act differently. So there's a difference between legacy models and the newer models on the way they handle it, not only because of the data that they're trained on, but the way they actually try to leverage the tokens. So not going to go deep into that. This is something that I highly recommend if you're new to AI. Just be aware that there's input token costs and there's output token costs. And of course, if you're building something with responsible AI, keep in mind that it's going to eat up your tokens. So not to get too deep into how your actual text input and output works, but just keep in mind that as you're building projects, especially image generation, including video generation. So if you think about the least expensive is always text, because it's text, depending on how big it is, the context, which context windows and all this good stuff, this is deeper into LLMs, it adds on to your cost. So the easy way to think about it is text is normally the cheapest, pictures gets a little bit more expensive, and all the way down to video generation where it starts getting real expensive. So as you start going through the actual foundations, the idea here is just to give you an idea of what your total cost could be, not official documentation. For official documentation, we highly recommend that you go into understanding the actual documentation for that specific LLM. Now, with billing, this is another big example. When you start building these projects, look at leveraging smaller models. And one thing that if you haven't heard of model routing, I would highly recommend, if you haven't used it before, think about it as an endpoint that will decide what the best model for the task given is. So if you point it to, like, let's say Azure Foundry has a model router. So think about it as you gave it 5 choices. It's going to look at what you input. It's going to select the best case for the LLM, and then select the model that is the most appropriate for it, because you don't always need a heavy model. And I'll explain to you a little bit more about what a heavy model is, because if you're newer to LLMs, you'll see that sometimes you don't need that big expensive model. Sometimes a small model will work, and there is differences between LLMs and SLMs. Now, I see a question in the chat, and I see Blanca's asking, what about pictures with a question versus the text with a question? So great question. So that's still going to cost, if you can embed a caption. Typically, if you're looking at the total cost for an LLM to generate an image, it's still going to cost just as much. It's more about the endpoint that you're using. Different LLMs, like what you'll see out there, great example for if you're ever curious about which ones actually generate images, I would say there's still cheaper versions for it. So if you're using like the Microsoft AI image generation 2.5 versus the 2E, there's always a cheaper option there, but it's still going to cost the same as generating an image with text or without text. It's still going to cost more, is because the way it actually generates the image. And I think if you look at one of the stats, we actually do an overview. And of course, one of the things you'll notice is at the end of each individual model, you're going to be asked a question. You don't have to answer this. This is intended for you just to remember, at least try to get a better concept or grasp around what actually was covered inside of this model. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that there is a deeper understanding of LLMs that we don't have time to go through. This is only a 30-minute session. So one of the things that we won't cover is understanding what few shots means. So there's one shot and there's few shot. There's core concepts here that are, especially somebody newer to LLMs, it's extremely important for you to understand, not only because one of the biggest things that you'll understand is that it's not only about the LLM, but it's about the data that you put in. There's this old saying that the trash in, trash out, that same core concepts. The better you write your prompts, the better output and a better structure you're actually going to get. So this covers going to deeper understanding of how it actually works, all the way down to finishing this specific model. And I know I'm going really fast. This wasn't intended to cover each individual model. Even if we click back, you'll see that we break down understanding what AI is, the landscape, the total cost, prompting, and end with responsible AI. Because of course, if you are building any type of program, it's super important for you to have the concept of responsible AI. There are principles on building with responsible AI, specifically to ensure that whatever you are building stays compliant. Now, when we look at low code, no code, it's great that in model one, we cover the intro to AI, but as we start looking at how do we get hands on, this was the piece that was probably the hardest thing for us to solve, which was how could we give you access to a resource that you can actually take? And that, I'm not gonna lie to you, that we spent a long time. The good news is that we actually found a resource. And with that said, if you've never heard of AI automation, not everything is an agent and not everything needs an agent. I love saying it, especially a little bit of context about myself. I work in cybersecurity and AI space, but not everything needs an AI agent. There's some things that are well suited for just AI automation. And I'll show you an example. In this first example, if you've never heard of make.com, what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and save us some more real estate up here. These are some resources that I've already mentioned, but the piece that we're going to be working with is make.com. If you've never heard of make.com, I'm a huge fan, specifically because not only do they help with a lot of the scenarios when you think about being able to centralize and easily deploy and monitor a specific deployment, they do a great job at that. So with that said, if you are going through the labs, the good news is that I've already spent evenings creating labs that are pre-recorded. So if you're looking for a slower, actual step-by-step guidance, you can read through. I personally like videos over actually reading. But if you're following along, one of the first things that we'll do is we're going to go ahead and click on deploy to make.com. When I click on deploy to make.com, this is going to take me to the make.com platform. The really cool part is that we created a template for you. So this template, all you have to do is click use the scenario. And if you're signed in, if you're not signed in, you're going to have to sign up for an account. But it's simple and straightforward. You can see how we just went from a lab inside of SOMOS.tech to my actual resource. So this is your resource to actually modify and secure and use. So of course, speaking of security, I have to emphasize this. This is an actual endpoint that is publicly exposed. Now, of course, we are wanting you to use and get your hands on it, but security is still top of mind. Especially even with this demo environment, I'm going to destroy everything as soon as we're done. But to give you an idea of what it looks like, we're going to go ahead and get started with Lab 1. Inside of Lab 1, all we have to do is create a webhook. If you've never heard of what a webhook is, just think about it like a phone number. So how can I call Bob or Alice and tell them something? That's literally all it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a webhook. Huge call out here is if you are using this in production, do this. You have to do this. Learn about key authentication. Key authentication is going to help you make sure that nobody can call it. Think about this as if you pick up, you're going to have to say secret, and the secret's cookies. If somebody says no secret, then you know it's not really you calling. So think about this, how you can provide some layer of security. It's not the only security you could apply, but something's better than nothing. So won't cover too deep on how this actually works. But if you are looking at leveraging it in production, please secure it using API key authentication. Now, what I'll do as a demo, I'm just going to go ahead and click save. And then I got my phone number. My phone number is over here. Again, because we are streaming online, this means everybody has my phone number. So that means anybody can call me. Very, very bad practice. But because of this is just a demo, and we are going to remove this phone number here shortly. We're going to continue. Now that we have our webhook enabled, we're good to go there. You saw that the red circles went away. Now we're going to talk about the brain. Now this is called an AI automation. This is not an agent. If you've never heard of what an agent is, it's different because an agent typically has an LLM and then it has tools, memory, which gives you the ability to do context, and has the ability to actually execute things. This is just a simple input output. That's it. So this would be called AI automation. Now, when we click on it, if you've never used make.com, you'll see that you're going to have to do a drop down here. The really cool part about this platform is not only do they offer you a free LLM, but they give you the ability to leverage this. So this is really cool. If you want to actually learn more, I would highly recommend doing some training courses. They have an amazing training course on YouTube, but get to learn more about this platform because I truly love this platform, not only because it gives you something for free, but also helps you learn along the way. Now, the first thing you'll notice is I still haven't even had to go put in my OpenAI or my Anthropic, Claude, or any LLM specific keys. It's really cool. That means you can get from the ground all the way running without applying anything, including a credit card. Now, what I'll do here is you'll see models. GPT, if you don't know what GPT-5 Nano is a pretty small model. Earlier, I was talking about the size of the model. The size of the model does typically mean its ability to do more. But again, you do not need the biggest model to do small things. In this case, we're just going to ask this agent. We called it agent. It's really not an agent. It's to get you grounded on the ability to have the brain. We're going to leave it on small. And we're going to leave this as is, and we're going to click save. At that point, all we've done is we have an agent already, or sorry, not the agent, a webhook already deployed, and we got our phone number. So we're going to take that phone number, send data into this. Now, the most important part here is that we need to click save. Once we click save, we're good to go there. Now, when we turn this on, that means anybody can call my phone number. So at this point in time, we're good to receive data. So now that we have everything green, so the reply to caller is what I'm going to show you next. We're going to go ahead and click back. So at this point in time, I clicked save. I turned on my actual workflow, and now we're going to click on back. Now we click back, we're seeing the view. This is the view of understanding scenarios. So understanding your scenario. And this is already covered inside of YouTube. So if you want some time to slowly go through it, you have the ability to do it here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste my new number, and you can see my phone number here that I'm going to delete right after this session. But you can see what is an AI agent in one sentence and give me a funny joke at the end. Now, when I click run, you're going to see what's going to happen. We're talking to the webhook. And when we talk to the webhook, you see the scenario. This scenario went from calling that phone number, which is the number that we just established. Now, if we click here, we can actually see what was the input. You see the message, what is an AI agent, and tell me a funny joke. Not only do you see it there, but you actually see it inside of the site. So the agent already responded. So you can see how this is going from a concept of being able to deploy an agent to actually getting your hands on. So how long did that take? That took like 3 minutes. And in 3 minutes, you got not only your first AI agent. Now, the great news about that is, or actually what I'll do is I am going to offline disable that webhook because remember, anybody can call that number and we don't want people calling that number. What we want to do next is deploy a new scenario. So now that we have this scenario complete, you're starting to get the hang of it. So now you've deployed your own agent. Remember, always secure it. If we go back and we go into the next module, which is creating a marketing agent, you can start seeing how it's going to get even more. So we're starting off the basic fundamentals where we're creating not only the first thing of just a webhook calling the phone number and we get a response. Now we're going to actually build a proper agent. So that took a few minutes, and this agent's only going to take a few more minutes as well. So we click on deploy, same core concepts. So what's happening on this screen is I'm disabling all those webhooks, but now I'm introducing the newer concept of an agent. Remember what I said earlier? There is a difference between AI automation and an agent. This is where you actually get your hands on an actual proper agent. We'll call this a marketing agent. And remember, I can't stress this enough, even though it's really cool to build these agents, please secure them. So I know that we're moving pretty fast. The good news is that you have this YouTube already pre-recorded. So if you want to take your time to go through it, there is a video recording of going through all this. We're going to do the same core concepts. If you're going to use this in prod, use the API key. Now I got my phone number. Once I got my phone number here, I'm going to go ahead and click save. Now, one of the things you'll notice is this looks a lot more different than the previous one. That's because make.com has a concept of an agent, because if you hover over it, you'll see you can add a tool. And I know we're going really fast and we're focused more on the core concepts here than we are about customizability, because we want you to have the building blocks to expand out. So this idea is just intended for you to get the ball rolling. I would highly recommend to look at their pre-built templates. They have a bunch of pre-built templates, but when you look at the customizability, you can start seeing the ability to expand out and tackle real world, let's say tasks, like who can respond to my emails. With that said, always secure your deployment. That is, I can't stress that enough. Now, in our case, we're going to introduce two new core concepts. Here, the first thing I need to do is first get rid of that little error page. So here, I'm going to go ahead and select make.com, and you can see that this large changed. We're going to switch this to medium. So because we're using a free, you can always upgrade. And if you are going to be building in prod, I highly recommend use the paid plan because there's a lot more functionality and a lot more features there. But here, we're going to go ahead and click on medium. And now you can start seeing the difference between what we built before and what we're building now is now we have an agent. The agent is going to receive intake and then use the tools to achieve the outcome. So in this case, I'm going to see what my goal is. My instructions for this agent is you're a marketing agent for a fictitious company. So if you look down, the goal is to turn the request into a social media post. So you can start seeing how we're leveraging not only LLMs to respond, to actually build these agents. So if we click on save, we're going to go ahead and we're good to go here. Now, the difference that I think is extremely important is that you'll see that you have the ability to even call out to a web. Oh, now they changed this. So now you have the ability to call out to web search. Originally, this was free, but it looks like it recently changed. So what we can do is right click and delete. So when we right click and delete, in our example, we're just going to stick to passing it a knowledge base. So when we pass it a knowledge base, we can upload a file or add an existing file. So at this point in time, we should be good to call our first agent. Our first agent looks a little bit light now. It doesn't have the ability to call out to the internet, but it does have the ability to use your actual knowledge for your enterprise. So if we go back down here, same core concepts apply. Here, I'll paste my phone number, and then I'm going to go ahead and run the agent. Now, when I run the agent, you're going to see that it actually, if you do what I just did, where I click accept, you see accepted, that means I didn't fully deploy my agent. What did we miss? We forgot to enable the agent. So that's extremely important to make sure that you're aware of this. You can even see that request went into the queue. So if you don't enable the actual agent to receive, it's not going to respond. So at that point in time, if you see accepted and you accidentally click send, you got no response. So what you want to do now is go ahead and click on running again and make sure you enable the agent. And there we go. You start seeing it takes a little bit more time and you can see it actually work. So it went down to knowledge. If you uploaded the file, we have a file for you to leverage and it provided a response for you. So here you can see not only the response, which is I'm ready to post. So here you can see that we didn't provide it the docs that it needed, but if I wanted to, I can I can pass this to MAI image to E, which we give you 3 credits to actually do. And then it's going to go ahead and generate an image for me. Now, this image is going to be interesting because we're passing it awaiting the latest announcements because there is no. All right. So I guess that works. You could download the image and post that. But the idea being we sent not only a prompt, we got a text response, and we could also get an understanding of image generation. So Blanca earlier asked about image generation. It's a great example of how you can leverage it. Now, we're not going to go through all of the models because I think we're almost at time, or we are at time. But as you go through, please give us feedback. We would love to keep making this even better because Lab 4 goes into a deeper level concept of actually deploying your app. We won't cover it in this call, but when you have time, check it out. You not only get a badge, but another big thing that we're announcing starting tomorrow is we're actually going to be giving away scholarships. So when it comes to scholarships, this is actually our first scholarship that we will be looking to give out. So specifically when it comes to the certification, our first certification that we'll be giving away a first scholarship to is going to be AI 900. So the Microsoft AI Introduction to AI in Azure. So thank you for joining today's session. Stay connected to the community. Keep going with the actual hands-on with the labs. As you get questions, feel free to drop them inside of the community chat. We're constantly looking at that. But hopefully you found this session helpful. I know this was super exciting for everybody that came together to build this, but we're always looking for ways to help the community. But with that said, thank you so much for joining today's session. Hopefully you found it helpful, and hopefully I'll see you at the next one.